Hello, welcome to another episode of the Great Work Launchpad. My name is Chris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org. This is the Great Work Launchpad, episode 18, continuation of the Shadow Work series, Shadow Work part 16. And this one is titled Fear or Love. So we're going to get into talking about that dynamic in the whole shadow work that we have to do to care more, understand ourselves, and get activated in the great work. So today's probably going to be a solo. Brandon is busy, so probably just be me piloting. And I guess I'm wrong. Someone joined. We got a joiner here. Someone joined. I'm not solo. All right, that's good. We got Derek Bartolicelli. Welcome aboard. You're going to pop up soon. There you go.
Good, Chris. How's it going, brother?
All right, you?
Not too shabby. A little overworked, preparing for the Path to Freedom Festival coming this weekend, actually. A lot of folks in the One Great Work Network are going to be there, actually, and also performing a little bit. So,
Yeah, in 2 days.
Yep. Yeah.
Cool. Has been busy with that. You're on the night schedule, getting prepped for all that, or does it end
It
early?
ends Monday. Doing a little roundtable reflection. Any artists that want to come by to share their thoughts and whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I meant, do you end early, like at night? Does it stop at like 9 p.m. Eastern, or does it keep going and then you stay up
Ooh.
super late?
It's not gonna go that late, but yeah. Uh, all the information you can check out on soundpath.org. Yeah, we'll plug that stuff in later. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah,
Thank you.
go check that out, people. Yeah, so the Great Work Launchpad, my little spiel at the beginning, trying to get people motivated into doing the great work. That's what the whole shadow work aspect is about, is the barriers to initiation into this work. So up to episode 16, and yeah, so fear or love, that's what we're going to get into. I'm sure you've got nuggets to add to that too. So when we're talking about fear or love, before we get to that, people do things in the world, and most people think that they're not evil, they're not doing evil, they're not doing immorality, and that they are good people. So they believe that they're doing good, and since they're doing good, that they are a good person. But that's not true. That's just a belief that people have. Because they're actually in the mindset of Satanism. And people might be confused by what that is. No, I'm not a Satanist. You're not a Satanist by an adherence to an ideology. You didn't become part of a group, part of a club. You didn't sign anything. You didn't try to become a member of anything. You're not part of the church. But the ideology that you have, the worldview that you have, the way of looking at things, what you have are the defining hallmarks of lower level Satanism. Now, you haven't gotten to the higher levels of eugenics, of trying to decide who gets to live and who gets to die. Maybe you're not even into social Darwinism of might makes right, or survival of the fittest, and whoever's the most ruthless is the one who gets to deserve to rule or survive. But pretty much guarantee that most of the people out there, the vast majority, 99% and more, are at least at the second level and certainly at the first level. And that second level is moral relativism. And the reason they're at moral relativism, because they do not have the knowledge of objective morality. They do not have the definitive knowledge of the difference between what is objectively right and objectively wrong. So that makes them a moral relativist. And the first level is you're stuck in egotism and survival. So the things that you value are surviving, getting on with your day, the comfort you can gain, the relative degrees of independence and freedom that you can garner in your life. But you're not thinking about true freedom. You don't even know what true freedom is. So we've talked about this earlier in the series of shadow work. And that's what the shadow work is going to get you to do, is to get you to face yourself and expose these bullshit lies and these bullshit stories that you tell yourself about where you currently are, or where you think you are, or what your behavior actually is, and as a reflection on you, how that defines who you are. So, probably the people listening to this have done some work, and for the majority, and anyone new to it happens upon this video from an interest in shadow work, well, most people just want to hear these bullshit stories that they tell themselves. And so there's no work to do. There's no shadow work to do. I don't have to work on myself because everything's good. It's all good, man. I'm fine. I don't need that. I'm good where I am. Don't need it. Don't need it all. So people tell themselves lies to avoid facing the truth. They're in denial of reality and truth. And the people in the truth movement and the freedom movement, quote, think they know what's going on, and they might know what's going on, or they might not actually really get it that much. But regardless, a lot of them think that they're helping just by knowing certain things. Like, oh yeah, I got it figured out, and like, oh, the Zionists or the Jesuits, and then you got the Black Pope, and you got the Club of Rome, and the World Economic Forum, and Trilateral, and all this stuff, and like, oh yeah, man, oh yeah, I'm a part of the freedom movement, and yeah, we're on our way. Well, you're actually not doing anything just by knowing. That's why knowledge isn't power. And by thinking this, well, you're just bullshitting yourself again. Because action is where you apply knowledge, and that's where the power comes from, because you're actually applying and engaging in energy and applying force in the world to make things happen. When it's just knowledge, it's just inside of you and it's unrealized potential. So this bullshitting themselves about helping a lot of people in the truth, and most people in the truth and freedom movement, they're like a Ralph Wiggum with from The Simpsons with the finger up the nose, and he's all innocent and naive and dumb, and he thinks he's helping. I'm helping. That was his catchphrase in The Simpsons, if I recall correctly. It's been ages since I watched that. But you're not actually helping, so that's why you're a Ralph Wiggum. What you're actually doing. So, what are you actually, if you think you're helping, what are you actually doing that's helping to move forward the dynamic of true freedom, to make it realized and manifested? We're not talking about your own personal freedom. We're talking about true freedom, which is the absence of false claims of ownership, which is the absence of enslavement on a wide scale. That's what true freedom is, when everyone's actually free. So you can know, you can acknowledge, and say there's a need for true freedom, so people can understand, oh yeah, I've been through Passio's work and I know about true freedom. Yeah, there's a need for, we need true freedom. We need it to be created. So you can know and acknowledge there's that need. But if you're not engaged in that great work of trying to manifest and create and actualize true freedom, then you're falling short in aligning your expressions of consciousness. You're lacking unity within yourself in those expressions of consciousness, your thought, emotions, and actions. These expressions of consciousness, they're not united. They're disunited. They're disharmonious. They are in contradiction. They are in opposition. So you're not a true individual because you're divided within yourself. You are an internal opposition, which brings us back to Satan, because Satan is Hashatan, the opposer. It's not actually a being, it's a state of being within yourself that you embody. And that's when you're in internal opposition, you have that oppositional force within you. So if you know there is a need for true freedom, but you're not doing what the requirements to create it, well then you're in internal opposition because your thoughts know, and maybe you feel it too, but you don't care enough, and that's why you're not acting. So you're in internal opposition. And individual, why you're not a true individual is because individual is in, which is the Greek prefix for not. So in, divided or dual, divi-dual. So not divided or dual. Well, you're actually not a true individual because a true individual is not divided or dual. So you might have lapses in life and you can think and feel a certain way and not act. But overall, you're trying to be more united than not. And this is one of those instances where it's not just an instant of this being disunited in internal opposition. It's a persistent state that you're in because you know what needs to be done. You know the requirements for creating that true freedom. You know that that's the direction we should be going in, but you're not acting yet. So you're persistently in that divided state because you can't erase what you know, and you're just stuck going nowhere if you don't try to work on yourself to figure out what's holding you back and develop whatever you need to, whether it's confidence or skills, computer skills or whatever, to get you where you need, because you know there's a need for doing the great work. And when you're operating from what we're going to talk about, what we're hinting at is fear or love, when you're operating from that higher consciousness aspect of love, that agape, that true care, well, that's what drives you. And because it's driving you, then you're going to be in inaction. But because you're not driven by that, you're in inaction. And that means you're still operating from fear that's driving your inaction. And that's what's holding you back from doing that work. And that's what that internal state of opposition is, that Satan, that Hashatan, is the opposer, and that's that fear force, that involutionary force, which we'll get into. So I'll pass to you, Derek, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, sure, Chris. Thank you. Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. And it seems, yeah, that it's like there's this dichotomy with, the overly conspiratorial type of people that are kind of stuck in that too much left brain imbalance, and then you got the new age folks with way too much fluff blown up their ass, kind of imbalanced on the right side of the brain. So you got that passivity and all that stuff. So yeah, striking the balance. It's a is it really that hard, guys? But yeah, you're talking about kind of like facing your fears, going into your inner workings and the traumas and all the stuff that's kind of holding one back, the individual, right? I like how you broke that down. I haven't heard that before, actually. I should have been looking these words up a long time ago, but yeah, that makes sense. Like, we're non-dualistic beings, and undivided, but yeah, there's so much overlays and conditioning that has us divided within ourselves. And so yeah, just having to do the inner work and sifting through all these things so we're not living in contradiction, right? Yeah, like thoughts, emotions, and actions are properly aligned and congruent. And more or less aligned to objective morality, as you mentioned before, right? So yeah, and yeah, I think you know, too many people are still stuck on the plane of effects, and still, and we all have to research these things, sure, but we have to move into understanding the causal factors of this so we can be operating on the plane of cause and be the cause point in our lives and taking the proper steps and actions and behaviors that are more aligned to natural law and how a sovereign being should function, and so yeah, there's like that inner emancipation that we have to work through first and foremost, and then be operating on that proper level of causality. I think more to it than that, obviously, but yeah, overcoming the inner tyrant, the inner adversary, and yeah, these things that hold us back just within ourselves, and things that have just been influenced and we kind of take on consciously, subconsciously, and whatnot, right? So yeah, we all got to work out these things within ourselves, and you know, when you get to a point, we can come on public platforms and try to help others get to these uh, echelons of consciousness or whatever, right? So yeah, that's back to you, Chris.
Yeah, that you mentioned causal. I forget how you phrased it, but be your own causal point or something like that. Yeah. Because when we get down to love and fear in terms of a lower and higher consciousness perspective, not like an emotional aspect, which is how most people are going to view the term love. So we could use other words for it, but or that's what these things are when they're like these drives and motivators and inclinations and forces within us. These act like a causal force within us because they are what are going to be driving and motivating our behavior. So the outcome, what comes out, is based on what's inside, and that's these causal factors, these forces that you can look at them as forces that we have within us that are driving this. So that's why we can ask, well, what is motivating you? And of course, we're talking about the great work. This is the great work Launchpad. So that's ultimately what's motivating you in your inaction, most likely. That's what this whole shadow work series is about. And the whole great work Launchpad is to get people launched, and that's what the rocket ignite the care. Maybe you need some anger. We'll talk about that. Probably be next episode. Probably won't get to it this episode, but that fuel, get mad as hell and don't take it anymore because you care about yourself. So then use that anger as a fuel to ignite yourself into action. So what is motivating you? Fear or this love? What's love? Well, let's get to fear first. This one most people understand. You're afraid of things. So this is a lower consciousness modality of being. It's a contracting of consciousness because when you're in a state of fear, an obvious state of fear, say for your survival, well, in that state, the blood goes to your limbs so you can be prepared to either fight or run away. You might freeze, but still your blood is all in you and you can feel it in you. If you're frozen, it's quite the feeling. So it's not a state where you're going to be like in deep thought and thinking about things and contemplating and learning. It's not this expansion of consciousness. It's a contraction of consciousness because it balls you into that moment where you're afraid and all you can think about is survival and your security and taking actions which will optimize your survival or security or bring you out of that state of fear so that you can feel secure and safe in your environment. And we're talking about the great work. Well, that is when you're being silent about enslavement and evil and how to end it, which is what the great work is all about, is about how to end our enslavement. Well, that's a state of cowardice and inaction and laziness, and that is this force of fear, this contraction of consciousness. And you can be in apathy, where you're not caring. And what this ultimately does is stagnation. So you're not doing anything, so you're stagnating. And that can apply in many different aspects of life. Here we're talking about the great work. And it's also known as an involutionary force, contrasted to an evolutionary force. Evolve is to fold out, and involution is to fold in. I think that's the etymology. So that's why it's contracting consciousness, not expanding consciousness. So you have the evolution in the love aspect. It's this higher consciousness as opposed to lower consciousness, and it's love in the sense of what the Greeks called agape. And this is like a cosmic force, not a personal love, emotion, or feeling. This has to do with true care. And it's true care because it's not just caring about whatever or caring about doing evil. It's true care because you're caring for moral truth, caring for truth, but the highest truth of moral truth. So you have true care, caring for the good, the right, justice, true freedom. You're caring about the rights of all being respected, not just about you or those you know. You care about everyone's rights being respected and trying to reach that outcome where everyone's rights are respected, because it's not currently the case. We're not talking about people in other lands or warlords or who knows what, or dictators. We're talking about in your own country, where you live, who you are now. Everyone is not having their rights respected everywhere on the planet where there is government, because that's what government does, is they violate your rights and they have a monopoly on violence. And that's essentially, whenever your rights are being violated, they're stealing your property, property rights, and that's making you a slave. So this love, higher consciousness, expanding consciousness, caring for truth, trying to realize a moral way of living that will amplify the possibilities of what we can do, which leads to more innovation, more technology that can free us and bring greater abundance, and that just improves the quality of our lives. That's expansive. It's the positive side, as opposed to fear, which is what we have now with government, making us fearful and complying with their edicts, or else they're going to hurt us more than the theft. The level of theft they engage in will up the theft level, the enslavement level. And so that manifests, instead of staying silent and how to end our enslavement, staying silent about the enslavement. Well, this is speaking out about our enslavement and evil and how to end that enslavement. And as opposed to stagnation or reversal, this is growth. As I mentioned before, creating more moral way, more freedom to do things, more opportunities to do things, more things can be done, more inventions, more prosperity, more abundance, and that'll lead to greater evolution as a species within consciousness and, eventually physically. Who knows what could happen there. So to reiterate, we're not talking about the other forms of love in Greek. Love was also eros and philos. So eros is romantic love, and philos is like friends and family. You love your family, you love your friends. So we're not talking about that. And you can have that, and there's nothing wrong with having those. But it's about not putting those first in your character and what constitutes you as a being. Because when you do that, well, then your lover or your family or your friend, you're going to have more loyalty to them than to moral truth, than to justice, than to right or good or true freedom or ending evil and slavery. So, for example, your lover, your family, a friend, your partner does a wrong, and then you side with them over what's morally right, just because, well, you have that attachment to them. You have this philos or eros form of love. You're not motivated from that higher dynamic, or it's not at the real principle, the foundation for how you live your life. You're not living by that agape, that true care, that higher form of love. You're in those lower forms, those more personal forms of eros, the romance, and the love of family and friends, and that's what drives you. So someone does something wrong, and you'll side with them, or even defend them, because hey, well, that's who you value. Where's morality in your valuations? Where's moral truth? Well, you might have it to some degree, but it's not higher in terms of what you're valuing in your life. You're valuing the lower forms of love. And again, nothing wrong with those lower forms of love, but you just can't be putting it above the higher form of love. That's got to be what's driving you, not being driven and making your decisions and choices based on that personal form of love, which then overrides the higher form of love that can actually get us to be free beings, for all of us to be free and no longer be enslaved. Hey, welcome aboard, Brandon. I'll pass it to you guys if you want to add stuff to that.
Yo, Brandon, I'll let you go for it unless you want to get settled in there.
I don't even know what Chris was talking
What's
about.
going on? Where
So
am I? What's this? What's
yeah,
this show?
literally
Who's
just
this
got
guy?
home, still sweating. So like hadn't even ate. Like literally just got home. So
Cheers.
uh, yeah, he'll dare you can probably talk and now he'll jump in.
Right on, yeah. So, yeah, obviously, you saw the title, Fear and Love, and getting into it, Chris was mentioning agape and stuff, and contrary to how we've been conditioned in life, and just we're constantly in this like state of survival and all this stuff. We gotta go through the rat race, leaving us with a sad face and all that stuff, stressing out because we don't want to be in last place and all that stuff, right? But fuck the hamster wheel crap, because there's much more to life than that, right? And yeah, so in regards to like the shadow work stuff, Chris, yeah, it's we can all become very enraged, when we come to these, specific realizations of how bad we've been played and mind controlled, conditioned, and whatnot. And yeah, like that alchemized anger is very, very powerful and potent, with the energy that can really be that launch pad for one to just use that life force energy to uh, do something good for themselves and others. And would people not be compelled to, share what they, learned with others, and that kind of stuff, So it's one thing to, let that anger just, consume you and burn you up, and you're just projecting that onto other people, and it's not really that effective. It's counterproductive, actually, and so that's why I say alchemized anger, because it has to go through that process and a filtration system so that it's the proper righteous anger, right? So yeah, you can tell people can, when they're just like ranting and this and that's, like, all right, yeah, but if they're like, I'm not even the biggest fan of that word, right? But if you just hear someone with that righteous anger and that conviction in their voice, like, yeah, yeah, I'm like, my ears perk up. I'm like, yeah, speak it, brother, sister, and all that stuff. So yeah, it's it just like all these things we're talking about, it's a process, and it's not just we snap right out of it and all of a sudden we're out of survival mode and all this stuff, right? So taking steps towards, yeah, like just cultivating that proper love for yourself and for life and all this stuff, and yeah, like getting more in tuned with that agape frequency. And I think that is also going to fortify one's, will force to and drive to do this type of work and continue the work upon themselves and continue refining the knowledge that they've come across and learned, and keep, sifting through all the distortions and whatnot, and, keeping the good old golden nuggets of truth to the side, and, sharing with others properly and all that stuff. And so, hey, like, it's a good cycle to get involved in, I guess. So yeah. Brandon, how you doing, brother? Long time no see. Want to meet?
Tired.
Yeah.
I can't even talk. Been calling too many strikes. Did Chris touch upon the four components of the Greek love? If we're talking about agape and fear, okay,
Word.
figured he did. But yeah,
I mentioned three:
if I'm
agape,
three,
eros, and philos.
yeah,
I was like 6 or 7. I mentioned them in my Truth is Love article from like 11 years ago, but
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I noticed. Yeah, they've been kind of getting boiled down to three. But yeah, eros has always been like the lowest form of love, as far as I've seen and come to understand. Because when you see people, well, stuck in eros, they're still in a kind of selfish, fearful, controlling, aspect. And if I'm repeating what Chris said, then he'll apologize. But like in that mindset, you still kind of want to control, and you don't want to, let go. Kind of like you want that other person, or like you want this item, kind of me, like mine, in almost like a childish form. But when you get to the highest form of agape, it's a more universal love for truth, and then also too a love for oneself. Like that's what we seem to forget about, is you can't really give these components of love to others if you don't love yourself. How starting off. And in order to love yourself, you have to have that connection with the love of truth. Because without that connection of the love of truth, then you won't be able to technically love yourself and willing to deal, with those components of, yourself. So we hear, these sayings of, like service to self, service to others, but it's always a lack of service to truth, because that right there is the highest form of love. Because when you have that love for truth, when you have that care for truth, then you're willing to do what's morally good first and stand upon principles, and not put someone else first, over principles. Then you may be willing to do something morally wrong, or you may do what this person says, like like the whole kind of ride or die, chick, or the whole kind of mob wife, like they are willing to sit by and turn a blind eye to what their spouse is doing that is morally wrong, all for like monetary benefits. So when we get to that highest form, love, even though it may be a spouse, even though it may be a friend, it may be a loved one, if it's not aligned to that highest form of truth and love, then you can call them out on their bullshit. And then two, give them time to rectify their behavior, and rectify they're wrong. And then given it enough time, if they choose to continue, they're wrong, then you may have to pull back those forms of efforts. And then two, how that form of agape love is also a form of tough love too, because that's what I'm saying is you care for the truth so much, and you care a lot about them. If you see them going down, that wrong path and doing that wrong thing, yes, you are trying to, you know, explain to them what's morally wrong. But if they are willing to continue and not, change, then sometimes you may have to do what's morally right and pull back, your efforts, and maybe detach, yourself from them, which sometimes may not be an easy thing to do.
those are all very good points that I did not talk about. So good job. Yeah, the service to self or others. Yeah, when you're serving truth, you're doing both. So that's the the high road, the high love road to take. And that eros, personal love, there's all those. Brendan said it's the lowest one because there's all these negative aspects that can develop when you're in that mode, when you're still in lower consciousness, jealousy, possessiveness, controlling. So there can be all these negative aspects. Not really there when talking about just friends or family, but that eros one that's why it's that lower one more. And there's that carnal aspect to it, and then there's that, that negative, beastly side to it. And good points on that. Telling, the truth hurts sometimes, the harsh truth. That's what I went into, and a lot of my truth is love is truth, I guess, thesis or whatever, comparison from years ago. That's what it was. A large part of it was about that it's part of the aspect of how truth is a destructive process as well. That when it's at war with falsity, so when people are attached to falsity, that's where it's that sword and the justice card, or Jesus, and I forget, Mark or Matthew or whatever it is, but he comes to the world with a sword, because it's to cleave and separate the falsity, to push it aside and to do battle with it, to get rid of it. So when you're speaking harsh truths to someone who's attached to falsity, it can be necessary. And when they don't want to let go, like Brendan said, sometimes you got to detach yourself from them because it's just too much of they're on the negative path and they don't want to change and they don't want to let go. So you go your own way. I'll do a 30-second just recap of what I talked about earlier. So if you want to talk about it. Believe you're doing good, but not. Mindset of Satanism, egotism, survival, moral relativism, not objective morality. Lying to yourself, bullshit stories. You want to hear bullshit. Denial of truth. People in the truth and freedom movement. Thinking they're doing good just by knowing, but they're not. They're BSing themselves. Ralph Wiggum, finger up the nose, I'm helping. To move forward in the dynamic of true freedom, not your own personal freedom. People can say and acknowledge that they want true freedom to happen, to be created, but if they're not engaged in it to create true freedom, then they're falling short in their alignment of their expressions of consciousness, so they lack unity. They're not a true individual in divided or dual. They're divided or dual, so they're an internal opposition, the force of Satan, the opposer. That's what it is when you're in that internal opposition. That's when you have that as a state of being within you, that Hashatan, the opposer within you. And when you're operating from love or agape, that's what's driving you forward, as opposed to fear driving you into inaction and holding you back from engaging in the great work to create true freedom. So that's a recap for that. And so about fear, you can still have fear. You can have anxiety, you can have doubt, you can have insecurity, you can have discomfort, self-loathing, even anger at a personal level. But in spite of these things, you can act in spite of them. You can overcome them to not let them hold you back. So when your fear ultimately prevents you, when your anxiety, your doubt, your insecurity, your discomfort, your self-loathing, or your anger, and that's preventing you from getting where you know you need to go, or maybe you don't know, and that's still holding you back from even acknowledging that. All these things are holding you back, so that's more shadow work to do, to get over that, and to overcome them and not let them hold you back from that higher cosmic love, from that higher consciousness purpose that you can engage in, and that you're not engaging in it. So when you have that cosmic love, it overrules those limiting factors. It transcends them. You power through them. You transcend them when you have this force, this drive, this motivator, this causal dynamic within you that is driving you, this true care, that you're going to transcend and overpower those things that you can have. You can still have them, but they're not going to be what's ultimately deciding what your behavior is going to be. You're going to have them, and you can have that self-awareness, self-reflection, introspection, recognize they're there, and then work on overcoming, powering through it, transcending it. So you conquer them for specific moments of action. You're not going to be removing them forever from your experiential potential. So in the whole construct of who you are as a human, you could still experience them. And it's not about purging them forever. That's not what this shadow work is of, one's on the negative side, one's on the positive side, so you got to never be on the negative side. No, you can. It's just you're not going to let it stay that way. You're not going to let that ultimately be the long-term driver for your behavior. It's at a specific time, momentarily. It can keep you locked in, but you're going to work on overcoming it. So this doing spite, people look at spite as a negative thing. Oh, don't do spiteful things. Well, there's a positive and negative to many things, and spite has this positive aspect of doing things in spite of your fear, that you're going to act in spite of your fear. So in spite of evil, you're going to act because fuck you, evil. You're going to act and you're going to try to end evil. And this is part of shadow work. It's not to never experience fear or these other limiting factors, but to not let them keep you limited. That's why they're limiting factors, because they're keeping you limited from that higher potential that you can attain to. You're going to choose that higher polarity, that higher potential that can be created. So there's the feeling things that are related to the force of fear. And then there's this dual aspect that I want to mention related to fear. So you can feel things related to fear within you. And then there's also serving the force of fear for the stagnation or the reversal, such as involution, going backwards, folding in. So you can stagnate or fold in when you're in that force. Moral advancement. So you can feel these things, these fear dynamics, anxiety, discomfort, insecurity. But then you can also serve the force of fear itself as a larger aggregate dynamic of what's propelling, like us as a species, propelling a whole people forward. And so I wanted to mention just those two aspects. So you can feel it internally, and then you can, whether you're feeling it or not, some people aren't going to be feeling it, but they're still serving that dynamic. And that's that Satanism part. So go ahead, guys. I'll let you guys comment on that chunk there.
Speaking of fear, I've always, kind of envisioned as you have like the natural states of, fear, like what most individuals, would feel if their life is in danger. If your child is, hurt, like these are just, like almost natural. You can have responses that, most, human beings with a conscious, have with fear. Like if I'm on the softball field, girl hits the ball, it's a line drive, like right back to the right back to the pitcher. It hits her in the chest or something. Like most people are going to have just a natural, fearful, reaction. But those are just parts of the elements of being a human. Being able to feel, being able to in hell emote, being able to put ourselves in another one's shoes. And like if you have children, then you know what how I'm talking about. But then too, how like Chris has said, like when you're serving fear, we got a lot of people out there who are serving fear. And you brought up in your 30-second rundown believing that you're doing good when you're not actually doing good. Well, I mean, just look at all of the order followers, who are serving fear, think they're doing good and can't even define good. So they don't know what good is. So when you're serving fear, you can also do that out of ignorance, and you can sadly do it from a conscious level, because a lot of people may not even care of what they are involved with, because hell, again, they put the paycheck over principles. And like I've always said, in the ancient times, people worship the prophets, but in the modern day, people still worship profit. So, when you put that mammon hell above principles, then you will always fall into the ladder of serving fear, which keeps us in servitude, which keeps us enslaved. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, what we necessarily talk about as order followers, the cops and militaries. You have order followers who are involved in schooling. You have order followers that are involved in the technological realm. You have order followers that are involved in hospitals. You have order followers everywhere because they disobey conscience. They don't decide if what they are doing is based in right moral behavior. So then, therefore, when you exclude that and take that part out of that, what you are going to create is going to be fear, because if you abandon that, then you take out that logical means to use free will choice. And that's not to say, that there isn't, I like talked about that first point. When there is a natural form of fear, if someone's life is in danger, you're not going to sit there and try to use logic. Like if your child is in danger, you're not going to sit there and try to analyze the situation. You're going to have to react. You're going to have to respond. But that's a whole different scenario than what we were talking about, how when it comes to serving fear, because fear is a vibration that shuts down consciousness, that shuts down thought, that shuts down creativity, that shuts down, sadly, free will. And the feeling that comes with that is something that sadly has a more lasting traumatic effect, because again, trauma is a wound. Like it's a scar. It's something that cuts very deep. And that fear that is being broadcast, these threats, these means of violence, these means of duress, these means of corrosion, that's really what stunts our ability to actually think outside the box, sadly.
Yeah, it's kind of, it seems like this supernatural force, this the waves of fear, it can make people feel petrified or inhabilitated to, like, can't even move and that kind of stuff. Yeah, kind of the goes into like the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn type of reaction stuff. Reaction R R complex of the brain. That's really, that overrides everything, it seems, when people are in those moments. And yeah, but in more general terms, yeah, obviously we're all quite familiar with and Chris, you've obviously made slides, Brandon, you too, in regards to the natural law, what is it, the generative polarities, with the love versus fear, and then with fear, ignorance leading to chaos and all that stuff. So yeah, people need to, I mean, it's just like realizing you've been lying to yourself. It's very subtle. It's hard to you know inspect these things and discover them within yourselves. But once you, sometimes there's just that aha moment where you catch yourself. It's like, hey, I'm operating from a place of fear, or hey, why am I lying to myself like that, or why am I playing? You know what I mean? So, uh, it all depends on the individual and all that stuff. But yeah, in regards to doing the great work, I think a lot of people are still held back on a lot of levels, just in regards to the fear factor, the fear of what other people think of how their voice sounds, or their aesthetics, or their flipping thumbnail, or whatever, right? People are going to hate you no matter what the hell you do in life, is what I kind of learned. And it's just, if you stay true to yourself and you walk around, operating from a place of, love for yourself, and that agape love for creation, existence, humanity, the universe, nature, right? Then anyone, throwing shade your way or whatever, it's more laughable than anything, because you know yourself more than anyone else, right? So like, yeah, that's not to negate, people's imperfections, and like being open to constructive criticism, because I know I am, and I want to refine my craft and all that stuff. Yet you, the comments sometimes you get on videos, it's like, okay, whatever. Obviously, you didn't understand what the hell was going on in the video, what we were talking about, or just you want to pinpoint one little thing and like, okay, little nitty picky monkey man, whatever. So yeah, like what helps me sometimes is just what's helped me in the past especially is just letting the love override the fear. Do you not have love for freedom? Do you not have love in your heart that is energizing you to try to see things better in this reality? So that's what pushes me, and I try to keep these things in the back of my mind to keep pursuing, keep moving forward, even if like, like the motivation isn't always there, or we get discouraged. We got the shadow banning aspects and whatever the fuck, like we got to continue these types of things regardless, and what the work we do is still going to be out there in the ethers, and they serve as reference points for future engagements. Like, talk about a subject with someone else and like, oh yeah, I did a video on that, please check it out sometime, and voila, things like that, so yeah, pass it off to you, Chris.
Man, I had something to say about what you said and slipped my mind. But what Brandon said, I remembered something to say because I kept repeating it to myself. I just wanted to mention relating to obedience to authority in the medical system. It was really heavy in the COVID era. There's these things called protocols. You got to follow the protocol. You can't individually use your critical thinking and your free will to assess the situation and try to diagnose and find a way to solve the problem. You got to follow the protocols set down by authorities, completely devoid of any actual reality in front of you. You just have to follow protocol, like a protocol droid, like a robot, which is a slave because you're not using your free will to think. You're just a droid, a slave, a program. And yeah, those were just goes to show you the poison that authority can create in the minds of humans. It's just unbelievable. And then you just turn into a robot, and that's what authority does. Because you give up your free will, your rational mind, ability to think and make your own decisions, and then you just follow orders, which is what following orders is you're a robot as well. You're not using your free will to discern what is right from wrong yourself and make choices based on that, because you're a robot, a protocol droid following orders. So, what did I read last? Yeah. Expressing the cosmic form of love is being in a higher state of consciousness. And that's to work against those who serve fear, which is to shut down higher consciousness potential and to shut down that potential to realize, actualize true freedom. It's to develop the courage to stop being a coward, and to be aligned with the progression of evolution and growth, to help progress evolution in consciousness and, maybe the physical body. It's to grow in consciousness. And as I mentioned for the third time, it's to grow by letting the potential of actions flourish and grow out and unfold. Because when you're not being restricted, you can act freely and you can engage in more things, engage in different things, be innovative, create new technologies, create more abundance and more optimized survivability, and who knows, and become a type 1 and type 2 civilization. Like all these things that we could do that we're not doing because we're restricted and controlled, and we're on the path of the involutionary force. We're serving the involutionary force overall, as opposed to being in this higher form of love and higher consciousness and all that potential that can unfold from it, that evolution that unfolds. And contrasted to that, there's this, when it comes to the force of fear, involution, this stagnation. There's this comfort in doing nothing, in not getting involved, in not sacrificing. Because that's what we're talking about. When you're getting into the great work, well, there's a limited amount of time in the day. You have 7 or 8 hours of sleep. You probably work 8 hours, and that leaves you about 8 more hours. Yeah, so 8 more hours to do other things. So you have like your morning routine, then you got like the supper, and if you got kids, take care of the kids, and then you want entertainment, you want to have fun, you want to go do this, blah 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 blah. Well, you got to sacrifice some of those things in order to take from that chunk of time, that limited chunk of time that you have in a day, or in a week, or a month, or a year, that grows and can amalgamate. And you got to sacrifice from there and put it into this. And this is what this, well, you don't want to sacrifice because it's more comfortable to just keep doing those things. And that's doing nothing in terms of the great work, but it's also like in terms of just doing the same things. Well, that's stagnating. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, the life and you're always doing the same things. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's this aspect of you're not doing anything in terms of the great work to create true freedom, to end your own enslavement. You don't get involved. You're not sacrificing towards that higher purpose, that higher goal, that higher love, that higher consciousness, and all that potential that we can create if we would live in a more moral way of being. And that's serving that involutionary force. So you can call it fear. You can say you're serving fear. You can say you're serving involutionary force. You're serving stagnation. You're serving that entropic force as opposed to a syntropic, more ordering, and all the potential that we can create. And when you're doing that, when you're not engaging in the great work or knowing what the requirements are so that you can work on attaining those requirements, or knowing what your limitations are so you can overcome your limitations, doing the shadow work to, I mentioned one thing, gain the self-confidence or develop skills. You need to develop computer skills. If you're not getting those requirements to then get to the requirement of true freedom, which is doing the great work. So there's the requirements to even be able to do the great work. And the great work is the requirement to realize true freedom. So if you're not doing this, then involution has you. Fear has you. Cowardice has you. The idea of, ideas you don't have ideas have you. This notion that sometimes works out, this is this force, this drive, this motivation, this causal dynamic within you. Well, it has you as you locked down, as you constricted, and you're stuck there. That's hence the stagnation.
Ishvet?
Yeah, Ishvet's another term. There you go. That's the
Yeah.
ancient Egyptian one for the chaos, that chaotic force, that entropic force instead of order and syntropy and ma'at. Well, there's Ishvet and Apep, Apophis. And so you're not helping. If you think you're helping, stop lying to yourself. First phase of initiation. And so you may have that desire for true freedom, but you have the fear of losing what you currently have. That was a big theme in Matrix 4, Resurrections. Resurrections. I was thinking
Yeah.
Revolution, but that's the third one. Yeah, Resurrection. Fear of losing what you currently have. So this, it was the dipole of you want something, but then you fear losing what you have. So then you're like bouncing back and forth, and you don't have a clear direction. And there's that dynamic. The analyst talks about they feared off that energy and that fear of losing things, and that's what fueled that was part of the fuel for the mausoleum thing. So fearing to lose what you have, and that attachment to what you have keeps you stagnated. It's what limits you from being a force input to actualize a better way of life, a better reality. So we could all be part of creating that better reality, that better way of life, and use that force within us that we can actualize to create, to manifest as our behavior and change things. But instead we're limited, we're stagnated because of our attachments of the things that we have, the comfort that we don't want to let go of, the sacrifices that we don't want to do because we like the things that we currently have and we don't want to stop doing them or change things up. So that's that limiting and that stagnation. And people aren't looking at the bigger picture, the wider scope of the moral condition of all. They're just looking at that limited scope of themselves, their friends or their family, and how well things are doing in that condition. They're not looking at the true moral condition even within that limited scope because they don't have objective morality. So that little area is where you're selfishly maximizing your survival or your time or your comfort or your enjoyment, your pleasure, your fun for yourself and those around you. And on a wide scale, in the aggregate, we could have all those things. But first comes the morality to then be able to maximize on all those great positive aspects of enjoyment and pleasure and fun. Because when you're a slave, you can still have those things as we are enslaved. We're not as enslaved as other people were in certain times in history, or other people still are now in parts of the world. But we're still enslaved. So we can still have all these things. But that just means that you're having all these things while you're enslaved. And that's like kind of a weird dynamic to be in. It's kind of contradictory, Wouldn't you rather be maximizing all those things while actually being free, as opposed to like getting what you can out of those things to eke out as much independence or freedom or pleasure, fun, enjoyment, and time to do whatever you want, as long as it's what the rulers and the masters say you're allowed to do. Because that's what we live in. You're allowed to do certain things and you're not allowed to do certain things. And if you try to do the things that you have a right to do that they say you can't do, well, you're going to get punished.
Yeah, because you can't really experience those things to their fullest. You can only have that limited experience compared to if you was free. You couldn't fully, experience the full totality, of it. And that's my problem is there are things that I want to experience and do, but because we're not free, I'm never going to get like the maximum full beneficial experience, from those things, because we are still enslaved. And even truly, like as you, like you said, it's like a contradiction, because if you are truly enslaved, can you really experience true love? Like that's the contradiction, and it's almost like they get you to fall for those emotional attachments to get you to forget the condition.
I'd say you can have that or whatever love with someone, that
Yeah.
eros aspect, because I'm sure even plantation slaves still had That
Yeah.
even though they had it worse than what we do. But yeah, they wouldn't have that true higher love dynamic between two people who are connected to that truth and that
Yep.
moral truth, that truer higher love, not true love romantic sense there. Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
So you guys say what you got to say, and we'll wrap it up for this episode and continue on the next one.
Yeah, it it seems like this paradox, right? Trying to have a wonderful, loving relationship and being, in that loving relationship with truth and freedom, yet, yeah, in the state of duress and slavery that the world is just like unfortunately locked into. Yeah, it's weird, right? But yeah, we can make of this life, as best as we can, and still have, some deep, meaningful, loving relationships, not just on that eros level, but, with the philos and with our brothers and sisters and whatever, right? And still be sharing that agape love for truth and being service to truth as well in that proper relationship, engagement, interactions. So yeah, that's what we're encouraging, right? Try to see those things, just in daily interactions. Of course, if you're just gonna be speaking with someone like a cashier for like 30 seconds, like you already know, right? But yes, just is that not a better place to be operating from than just like, oh, like going through the matrix and fuck all these, zombie sheep and all that stuff. We got to be planting seeds any which way we can. And yeah, like, not the biggest fan of, all these people around me that are just continuing the perpetual slave situation via voting and what have you. Yet, we got to work with what we got around us a little bit, right? But yeah, it's quite the conundrum. And yeah, the Matrix, the analyst, man, he spilled the beans on so many things, man. I was so captivated by some of his speeches and rants and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, think about these archons, right? Anarchy, without rulers. Yet, if you've looked into some works of some people and even, direct accounts, fear is that potent emotional energy that these archons love to, loosh. Like, think about like adrenochrome and that kind of stuff, but, on that fear factor type of thing. And so, yeah, it's just so much divide and conquer stuff and so many things conditioned to keep us in this perpetual state of fear or the survival mode and that kind of stuff that is not allowing us to fully operate and access that, the triunal brain and the neocortex especially, right? Because like that our complex is overriding some things sometimes. And yeah, I've seen this with some friends, even living with them, single mom, just always like on the hustle, trying to do stuff. When can they sit back, relax, and, take time for themselves to heal and introspect and reflect and all this stuff, So yeah, it's hard for people to get a foothold into just getting out of the muck, and whatever the fuck, right? So yeah, it may seem pessimistic or just like, it's so fucked up. Is it even worth it to make this effort? Yeah, yeah, it most definitely is. When you're operating from your empowered version of yourself and not just stuck in R complex way of going about life type of thing, you know. So yeah, and then it's like that heart opening more and more, or wider and wider still, like Mario West likes to say. But yeah. Anyways, I'm cut it off there before I digress more. But thank you.
The fear of learning. Because you hear so many people say, "Well, I don't know how to do this." Well, then the deeper question is, what blockages are in your mindset that's preventing you from learning? And that's the thing is like you are always capable of learning something unless you get to the point where you just, have brain damage, and you're sitting in a bed, hooked up to some machine. But in today's day and age, we can learn so much. And this fear of not knowing how, to do something, that's what it is fear. You can override that. You can learn, you can take the steps, necessary. There's so much online still, like how-to videos. So when the individual is like, well, I don't know how to create videos, I don't know how to do AL podcasts, neither did I. You know, I'm sure Derek didn't, he'll know how to do, most of the stuff. I'm sure Chris was possibly, more into computers than how most of us. But the thing is, you can learn as you go. You're not going to learn everything, freaking overnight. So you can learn, steadily and, progress, take in more knowledge and then sacrifice more time for you to learn and benefit and grow. And that's the thing is people think they're going to do all this stuff overnight. Like, no, with any form of sacrifice requires time in order for you to gain the actual skills that are, required. So my question, out there to the listener, if you want to get involved, but you don't know how to get involved, then why aren't you taking those steps of problem solving to figure out what is preventing you and holding you back? Because you can do that. And it's really not that hard to do. It's really not that hard to do. And then you also talk, hell about sacrifice, the 8 hours, of sleep, 8 hours for work. That's so real. That is so real. That's something that no one's going to be able to escape. So you will be pulling time from other things. That's the reality of it. If you have a family, you may be spending less time, with loved ones. You may be spending less time sleep. I know we've all done it. You may be spending less time, doing things you actually want to do that make you happy. But unfortunately, that's the sacrifice that it is required in order to do this kind of work. And that's why it's called great work, because it takes great sacrifice. It takes a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
want
I'll
the,
close
the
on that.
great, happy, fun party time,
I know, right? Yeah, the great big party. Yeah. Oh man.
Um, what Derek said about, like the grind of survival. That's one of the things that keeps, some people are exhausted and then they have like just regular life stuff and then they're just so exhausted they can't even they don't have they don't even have the mental fortitude to even engage in higher thinking.
Yeah.
So there's this whole, because of our way of life is based on economic survivability, which is a flawed way of life and all that goes with it. That's part of the enslavement is you can't actually do anything or survive without money. So you're stuck in the system of enslavement because you can't actually be free. You can't just go find some land and make something. Because if anyone finds out, like the government will be like, hey, where's our cut? Okay, we're going to put you in jail. We're going to take your stuff. We're going to steal your house. So people are in the grind and in the poorer levels, you're like so busy in that grind that you don't have the time, and you're so exhausted from other things, or maybe you have a second job. Like there's all these circumstances where it becomes even so hard. Just the work of life and living is just so hard to even engage in the other aspect potential of like thinking about things and going to learn things. Now they'll be more inclined to upskill into a trade or a computer skill to get a better job, which then could provide them with the opportunity to engage in more thinking. But when you're in that lower level, you're just going to be, it's all about survival and trying to make your life at least less about survival. And then when you make it less about survival, then you can engage in that thinking. And another thing that Derek said had me thinking that, and what Brendan was talking about, we were talking about is sacrifices. Even if you don't have those views and you're not popular, and it's like, is it really worth it? Like Derek said, well, what's worth it in it is that you're serving that higher force. You're becoming part of the solution. You're in the modality of doing work to create that higher goal of true freedom. That's the goal of what you're doing, is to advance that eventual outcome. So even though you yourself might not have much of an impact, at least right now, or even in the future, it might not have that much of an impact. What you are doing yourself, and why is it worth it, as Derek mentioned, it's because you're serving that higher, people talk about the greater good. Well, that is the greater good. That right there. So even if it has no effect, or you're not having an effect right now, and you might have more of an effect as time goes on, and it won't be that great of an effect. Even Mark Passio was like disheartened with the effect that he's had, and even though he's reached, hundreds of thousands of people, it's like, the point isn't about, okay, so the goal is affecting other people. That's the goal of the great work, is to influence the mind so that they can be influenced to change their behavior. And as everyone does that, then the world changes. But is it worth it, even if that's not happening, is for you, for your state of being, for your current nature and state of being, that ontological aspect of who you are right now. What makes up the constitution of who you are will be someone that cares not only about yourself, but about the larger picture, and serving that true greater good, because it's about serving true order and true freedom, moral truth. So even for yourself, for your inner constitution, it's I don't know if I could say it's like a part of well-being, but you should feel good about yourself just for doing it, even if it has no impact, just for the fact that you're doing it and that you're serving that higher potential, that higher force. I just wanted to mention that in closing. If anyone wants to say anything else, if not.
Yeah, on that, adhering to principles and abiding by those principles are what helps one build integrity. So yes, it is worth it, even though we may not necessarily see the results we want. From an inner standpoint, it gives me more confidence because I know where I stand and I stand for something. So I'm able to hold my head up high and have a different level of respect for myself because I'm not fucking ignorant and I'm out here doing the moral right thing. So I have a different swag when I walk. And people do notice it. People do notice it.
And one last thing I wanted to mention is, if you care about being a moral person, that's why you do it. That's why I started doing it. because I wanted to be as moral as I could be. And
Yep.
that's part of it. So if you care about being a good person, a moral person, then there's motivation for you as well. Yeah, Derek, I see it.
This guy, yeah. Um, yeah, do it to make sure that your heart is as light as a feather. Like Mayat, Brandon mentioned Ishvet earlier on. So yeah, like we need to do these things just for the sake of it's the right thing to do. And your soul is going to thank you, even if you're not really hearing it right now. So, mosquito. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good note to end it on.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, guys. As always, appreciate you coming by and voicing your voice. Always good. So thanks for everyone tuning in. And catch you on the flip side. Take care.